What is up, you guys? This is the Versa Podcast, and my name is Tristan Mitten, and this is my co-host, Zach Brown. No, he does not sing for the Zach Brown Band, but that would be dope. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about some cool topics, kind of about men and kind of some thoughts that we have on what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. We've been chatting a lot. Me and Tristan, we work together literally every day. We spend probably more time together than our families. But we get talking about things, and so that was a topic that got brought up that we were talking about was just the modern day men mostly and women, but mostly men, because we've chatted about current events and what's going on, and just how men today are so different than they were. I would say, obviously a long time ago, 10, 20 years ago, but even more recently, like look at current, 2 to 5 years ago, just the change in men, how have they become soft, weak, like not confident, like what's going on. We've tried to come up with a few maybe reasons why that is, a few kind of general topics of what's maybe causing that. And yeah, we're going to touch on them and kind of more discussion than anything, but kind of see if we can pick this apart.
100%. So kind of the first thing that we're going to talk about is, I was watching a video this week, and it was Joe Rogan podcast, and he was hosting Jordan Peterson as one of his guests. And the video talks about how Jordan Peterson basically says how men need to be monsters. And it's kind of interesting the way that he says it, but it really puts it in perspective about how men today are essentially becoming weak, and how we all need to become monsters in certain aspects of our lives, and in other aspects we need to be, humble. And what he does is he refers a scripture that talks about being meek, and he talks about how maybe that's been mistranslated over the course of 300 years of the Bible. But essentially, what he's referring to is the fact that men today, and we're not just talking physically, right? There's physically weak men, but that's not what we're referring to. We're referring to mentally emotional, weak versus strong men. And ultimately what it boils down to is weak men, they enjoy, things that bring short-term satisfaction, drugs, alcohol, partying, the easy way, right? And so ultimately you don't see a lot of men nowadays who really are pursuing long-term happiness, which comes from hard work, family, God, religion, those things that, they don't come easy. They're not fun and glamorous, but at the end of the day, those are things that strong men, that they attribute to. And I think that's something that we want to talk about.
Yeah, and even then, like with current events, like look at like what's happening in the world and war and all that kind of stuff. And I think more so obviously here in the United States, if we went to war, who do we have that's going to fight? Like you look back into like these different, World War I, World War II, more, the age of like our grandfathers and stuff. And it was just different back then. I mean, these men were like, even at young ages, like my grandpa, like he worked on a farm, like cowboy, like rode a horse, like had a gun, and then those type of people were called to war. So at that age of, let's just say 15 to 18 back then, what are the 15 to 18-year-olds doing today? I mean, right. Maybe they might know how to use that weapon based on the video game they played. I'm not sure, maybe not correctly. Who knows? But yeah, just the men then versus now, it's totally different. And I might be a little worried about who would go fight for us.
I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like, especially right now with what's going on in Ukraine, I mean, it's very likely that we could be going to war. And whether it's with Ukraine or with whoever, like, we don't know. But I think it's something that we really need to see, like, what percentage of our viewers would actually pick up a gun and fight if it meant standing up for our freedoms and liberties.
Exactly. I mean, you can't factor anything out in the world today.
Right.
Or with housing, finance, whatever it may be. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen.
For sure. And so kind of what we wanted to tie this into is basically how the fact of, And this is a study, and this is an article that we actually pulled up on Forbes. And basically the article, the title of the article says, "You're not the man your father was." That's pretty crazy that they literally just put that as the headline. But basically what it's talking about is how over the past 100 years, 10 decades, how testosterone levels in men have slowly gone down year over year, decade over decade. And what it talks about, and this is straight from the article, and it says studies show that men's testosterone levels have been declining for decades. The most prominent, a 2007 study in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, revealed a substantial drop in U.S. men's testosterone levels since the 1980s, with average levels declining by about 1% a year. This means, for example, that a 60-year-old man in 2004 had testosterone levels 17% lower than those of a 60-year-old man in 1987. That's crazy.
That's insane.
I mean, just put it in perspective. It's 2023, and in 2000, that's a 23% difference of testosterone levels of men now versus in 2000.
Yeah, it's insane. And I mean, you look back and then, again, it's so hard because I think I've always loved like history and looking back into this kind of stuff. And I feel like it used to always be like, oh, like 10 years ago, there was this, and this is like a change. But like society and like the world is drastically changing so fast. Even like just laws and new things that have happened over the last year, even with like COVID and everything that's been going on, and like the drastic changes. It's not that long ago that these drastic things have changed, and we were talking about like processed foods and just some of the things that could be causing these like drastic spikes for that, which is hard because even me, like I don't go to the doctor. Like I haven't been to the doctor in like 8 years. Like if I get sick or like a cold or even something pretty bad, I'm like, I'll figure it out, like I don't. And so to think like how drastically these things are changing is insane to me. And I was looking at a few of the more recent things that I think that have changed. I mean, obviously the food, like processed foods. I mean, kids are being raised on processed foods. But as far as like more adult style, I looked up an article on medical news, and it's talking about how some of the major key indicators of low testosterone today for, let's just say, 21 and older is processed foods, but the second most popular is drug abuse, tobacco, and marijuana. And there's plenty of states that are legalizing marijuana right now, which I'm not against. There's definitely good purposes for it, but kind of from like the religious side of things, like using food, substances, all of these things in moderation. And so there's so many things, and it's kind of silly to think like food is being abused, but yeah, I mean we there's a lot of processed foods that we like and could eat, but on a mass level, if that's all you eat every day, it could be bad for you. And so it's crazy, these things that I wouldn't normally think, because like I grew up, you eat like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you just playing sports, like in high school, you just pound stuff down, you just eat whatever you can to get sugar and all this stuff, but you don't think about the effects that it could have on your body. And then now with alcohol, marijuana, like all of these things, I think our like modern day, we make impulse decisions, especially with like social media and everything. It's just like you were talking about, immediate satisfaction, and so we just do these things and we don't think about the consequences. And one of them that even I don't think about is food. Like drink. I probably my fiance gets mad at me for drinking energy drinks too much.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a habit. I'm just like, oh, I drink Red Bull, grab one when I'm at the gas station. But it's, I don't think about the long-term consequence that could have on my health.
100%. And I actually think that a lot of people are waking up to it, because think about how much just the health and wellness industry has grown. I mean, you take all of the gyms that are popping up in the areas, and, all the healthy salad and goes, and, these different nutrition places that are kind of blowing up. And I think that people are realizing that, eating processed foods and not eating healthy, for one, has a physical negative effect on your body, but also a mental effect. I mean, everybody feels better after they go to the gym, right? It's not easy. It feels like shit when you're at the gym. But those things that are harder, like I said, it comes down to the weak versus strong men. The weak men are going to sit at home, and they're not going to, they're not going to take care of their bodies, and they're going to do whatever's easiest.
Yeah. And frankly too, like I think growing up, like you almost, as like a young man, you kind of feel like indestructible. You're just like, I'm not going to break a bone. Like you just live life and you don't really think about it. Right. But even me, like, as I've gotten like older, like I'm getting married and I'm now thinking about those things more. And in that article I was reading that made me kind of think more as like growing up, getting married, starting a family, is some of these things we're talking about. Like we initially, I feel like, started researching it because of men and men being soft and weak and these type of things. But in that article, it talked about women too, which was very interesting to me. Again, I haven't dug into, when you hear the word testosterone, you don't think like women, right? Right. But reading that article was talking about how these items, these food, drugs, alcohol, whatever, are reducing testosterone in women, and even more so, I think, than men on certain aspects. And I didn't even think about that, but in the article, it's talking about how the low testosterone in women reduces sex drive, fertility, muscle mass, and increases fat distribution. So that's huge. I mean, especially the fertility part of like, you hear about how difficult it is to get pregnant nowadays and all these things.
I feel like it's so much more common to hear that.
Yeah.
I feel like I hear more about it more and more as time goes on.
Yeah. And again, I didn't think about that. Like I learned that testosterone, like how much it affects women. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So,
even just the fact of you look at, just look at the amount of men that want to become women, like this whole transgender movement. My wife is, she's a teacher and she teaches fourth grade. She teaches fourth grade, and she basically told me the other day, she's like, yeah, I have 4 kids that think that they're boys, biological boys, but they want to be, and they think that they're girls. And they're going up to her and they're saying, hey, Mrs. Mitten, can you please refer to me as she? And it's like, these kids who can't drive till they're 16, they can't drink till they're 21, vote till they're 18, but they can choose their gender in 4th grade.
Makes no sense. And they're supporting it.
It's nonsense.
Yeah, like everyone's too scared. I don't know. I mean, it's a kid, so I don't know what they're scared of, but they're too scared to tell the kids that no, like you're a boy. Like, yeah, where do you draw the line? Like where you're like, no, like you're a boy.
Like I'm all for it. If you're 18 years old and you're like, hey, I want to chop my dick off and I want to be a girl and dress like a chick, go for it. Like I have no problem with that. But the second that you start to bring kids into the equation, because not only does that affect that kid, but it influences all of the kids around that kid to say, hey, like, what is that kid doing? Is that something that I should be doing? Because if they see their friends doing that, it's going to only make them be curious and ask these questions to themselves that they shouldn't be asking in the first place.
Yeah. And again, I'm not against it. Like I'm not against transgender to an extent. Yeah. I'm not against the, gay, any of that stuff. Like I have really good friends on both sides, and I totally respect it. But it's more so when I think it's more of the history for me of like just trying to recognize the agenda that's being pushed as we're moving through, years ago to now, or even the same thing like in education, how I don't know like firsthand, but I heard that they've kind of swapped out some of like the children's books in like class where it's no longer like mom and dad, it's like mom and dad, and then there's like dad and dad, mom and mom, and which is fine. It's just I think that I think for me, like growing up, it's always like there's a very there's certain things that I think should be taught in the home by parents, and so now I think it's just hard where these agendas are being pushed where there's these things being taught, and I don't know how they're being taught. Again, I don't have kids, and so, but it just kind of worries me that I don't know how things are being taught and said, and I have my own beliefs, and so then when you've got kids coming home with these brand new beliefs, and they're asking, you as a parent questions of like, this is what I was taught. It's just it's confusing times. Like, it's just the world. There's things that we have to look at that we didn't have to look at 3 years ago, 5 years ago. It's just
it's backwards.
It's different, yeah.
One of the things that we're actually looking at is and this is something that I actually found out this week. But I mean, you take Ukraine and kind of what's going on in that side of the world right now, and obviously we get a lot of our oil, a lot of our goods and produces from that area. But one thing that people don't understand is that the world consumption of wheat. We get 1/3 of the world's meat. We get 1/3 of the world's wheat from Ukraine, and the fact that what's going on there right now, and how we're basically going to get hit with this shortage of food, and just ultimately calories at the end of the day, and we've even looked into other things, not just what's going on in Ukraine, but. And this is an article that we found. It's published by The Paradise. And what it talks about right now is what's going on is it says the destruction of food processing plants across America. I don't know if you've seen or heard about this.
I heard about a couple of them.
Yeah.
I haven't dug into it too much.
But basically what it is it's like over like 10 food processing distributors have basically been burned down over
it's
the
like
past.
Worldwide. It's not just in the U.S., right?
No, this is worldwide.
Yeah.
And majority of these food processors have been in the United States. But it's pretty crazy what's happening. And I mean, and this is an article that goes right into it. And this is just a few instances, and it says on August 23rd, Attack Meat Products, a meat processor in Cobb County, Georgia, was set ablaze. The temporary closure of the facility, a family-owned business, had minimal impact on the national food supply chain. On September 13th, a third food plant was set on fire, JBS Food Production Plant in Green Island, Nebraska, which processes 5% of the nation's beef, was reportedly aflame for nearly 15 hours. On February 2nd, Shear's Food Processing Plant in Hermiston, Oregon, which supplies a large portion of the western United States with potato chips, burned down. I mean, this goes on and on and on. I mean, I can count over 10 instances of food processors burning down. And this is in the past, 2 to 3 months. I mean, I don't think there's a coincidence there.
No. I mean, you can tie it to a ton of different things. I mean, with all the shortages, I mean, I try not to dig into it too much because there's so much negativity involved in it. But even with the last year in the real estate, it's like it was the same thing. Like, I was reading articles about that where there was all these lumber shortages, but yet there was people posting online about all these yards that had overstock of lumber, but yet they're telling us there's right. a lumber shortage. And so it's the same thing with the food. Like, they're trying to, again, you don't want to, it's hard to think that, what's going on in the world and the government. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's some control trying to happen with our food and what's put into our body. And it's crazy.
Well, at the end of the day, a man that is high testosterone is somebody that is not compliant. And I think at the end of the day, the government, the deep state, they don't want compliant men. And I think the more you see what's unraveling, and you take what's going on in Ukraine and these food processing buildings and warehouses burning down, I think it's all tied together. And it's pretty crazy because you take, even a guy like Bill Gates, who is all of a sudden, buying up millions of acres of farmland. And this is actually another article that I found, and it reads, Bill Gates is the biggest private owner of farmland in the United States. In total, Gates owns approximately 240,000 acres of farmland, with assets totaling more than $690 million. I mean, it's crazy.
No, that's crazy. Um, and it's hard too because, like, I mean, talking about like even just this situation of like soft men, and it's hard because I feel like our society like just wants to take the easy way out. Like it's like no one. It's not that no one has a backbone, but just like even in the workforce, like I just think about. I was listening to a podcast with Grant Cardone the other day, and he was talking about this exact thing, and he was talking about how like everyone just they want to like as far as men that have worked for him to they want to get paid before they do the work, and they want to they just want to take the easy road out. And so like you said, we just don't have men that want to go and do the work and earn it and put themselves out there. It's hard too. Like I think about like the government, like the stimulus. There's all these avenues where they're putting us in a position to be weak, to not work and not put ourselves out there. It's just like stay at home and let us make the decisions for you,
Yep.
which is it's scary.
Well, I mean, imagine if the men in the 13 colonies, when the United States was forming, and think about the tax that the British had on the tea that we were importing and exporting, and literally just the fact that they were taxing their tea. I mean, they went to war over that. I mean, that was like the tipping point for them. I mean, if you didn't have strong men at that point, if you didn't have quote unquote monsters, we wouldn't have the liberties and freedoms that we have today. And so I think there's a lot that goes into it, but at the end of the day, I think it's all about speaking up, and I think it's about, spreading the awareness of, hey, men need to be strong. They don't need to be weak. And it goes down to the emotionally weak, physically weak. And yeah, I think it's our responsibility to spread that.
And again, at the end of the day, like it's our choice to be for men and women to be strong or weak, and we have to make that choice every day. And yeah.
Cool. Appreciate you guys. Well, we'll see you guys next time.